Imagine this, a man who once stood at the height of power, beloved by his king, but when faced with a choice between loyalty to the throne and loyalty to his faith, he chose to defy everything and ultimately paid the ultimate price. This is the story of Thomas More, the man who refused to bow to King Henry VIII's will, even if it meant his life. Born in 1478, Thomas More was not just a lawyer, scholar and politician. He was a man of principle, a devout Catholic who saw his faith as non-negotiable. From his early days in London, he rose to prominence, becoming one of the most trusted advisors in the Tudor court. He was a brilliant writer, authoring works that would influence generations, including his legendary Utopia, a vision of a perfect world based on reason and fairness. But all his intellect and influence would not save him from the wrath of a king determined to reshape England. In 1535, after refusing to accept Henry's claim as the supreme head of the church, Thomas More was imprisoned, tried for treason, and executed. This is the tale of a man whose unwavering faith made him one of history's greatest martyrs. So let's explore the remarkable life and legacy of Thomas More. On February 7, 1478, in the bustling city of London, a child who would later become one of England's most revered figures was born. Thomas More was the second of 6 children born to Sir John More, a lawyer and judge, and Agnes Granger. Sir John More, a figure of prominence in his own right, was a man of firm beliefs, a disciplinarian, and someone who placed a high value on learning. His influence guided Thomas's early life and set him on a path of intellectual and moral integrity. More's early years were marked by the stability of a relatively affluent family and the advantages that came with such a position. From a young age, Thomas showed a keen aptitude for learning. Recognising his potential, his father enrolled him at one of London's best schools. The educational foundation he received there was exceptional. He was introduced to classical literature and the great thinkers of the time, which shadow his worldview. More's aptitude for study was so evident that he caught the eye of Archbishop John Morton, a man who would become one of his most important mentors. Impressed by More's intellect and demeanour, Morton saw a future of greatness in him, famously declaring that More would become a marvellous man. More's journey in education did not stop in London. At the age of 15, his father sent him to the University of Oxford, one of the finest educational institutions in Europe. There he spent 2 years immersed in the study of Latin and formal logic. Oxford would shape More's intellectual abilities, and it was there that he was exposed to the ideas of the humanist movement, which emphasized the importance of classical texts and the development of the human character. His studies at Oxford formed the bedrock upon which his future writings and philosophy were built. After his time at Oxford, More returned to London, where his father pushed him into the study of law. Thomas was admitted to Lincoln's Inn, a prestigious law school, in 1494, where he honed his legal skills. By 1501, he had completed his studies and was officially recognised as an utter barrister. At just 23 years old, More was a fully qualified lawyer, and this was the beginning of his public service career. In 1504, More was elected to Parliament, representing the town of Great Yarmouth. It was in this role that his reputation as a man of principle and integrity began to take root. Even as a young man, More was unafraid to stand up to the monarchy. In 1510, he was elected to represent London in Parliament, where he soon gained a reputation for fairness, courage and honesty. His willingness to speak truth to power, especially his resistance to King Henry VIII's demands for funds, set him apart from many other courtiers. His rise to prominence was swift. The people revered his character. Throughout his career in law and politics, More's religious devotion remained a central part of his life. He was an avid reader of the scriptures and maintained a deep personal connection to his Catholic faith. This devotion to God was a theme that would run throughout his entire life, even as he navigated the complex political landscape of Tudor England. Yet More's faith was not just an abstract concept. In his early adulthood, he began questioning whether he was truly meant to be a priest, as his father had hoped. To test this, More spent time living a monastic lifestyle in the Carthusian monastery next to Lincoln's Inn. He embraced the strict routines of prayer, early rising, and frugal living there. He immersed himself in the quietude of monastic life, but after a period of reflection, he concluded that he could better serve God and humanity in the world rather than within the walls of a monastery. In 1505, More married Jane Colt, the eldest daughter of an Essex farmer. Together, they had 4 children: Margaret, Elizabeth, Cecily, and John. More's role as a father and husband was just as important to him as his work in law and politics. He took an active role in the education of his children, surrounding them with intellectual stimulation. He also educated his wife in literature and music, striving to elevate the lives of those around him through learning. More's home life was deeply influenced by humanist thinkers such as Erasmus of Rotterdam, whom More counted as a close friend. Tragedy struck in 1511 when Jane passed away at a young age, leaving More devastated. In the same year, he married Alice Middleton, a widow with her own daughter. This second marriage was unconventional in some respects, and More's relationship with Alice would become a subject of admiration for its mutual respect and understanding. Though More and Alice had no more children, he became the guardian of 2 more girls, Margaret Giggs and Anne Cressacre, who became as close to him as his biological children. More's commitment to education and intellectual development extended to all his children, regardless of gender, a reflection of his progressive humanist views. It was during this period of life that Thomas More began writing some of his most famous works. His unfinished history of King Richard III is considered an important early work in English historiography, offering a portrait of Richard III that would shape perceptions of the monarch for generations to come. However, Utopia, published in 1516, would become his most enduring legacy. In this work, More crafted a vision of a perfect society, one where reason and community governed all aspects of life. The book was a criticism of contemporary society, which More viewed as corrupt and self-serving. In Utopia, More advocated for communal living, equality, and the rejection of individualism. He famously wrote, "Pride thinks its own happiness shines brighter by comparing it with the misfortunes of others," a sentiment that speaks to the humanist ideals of compassion, equality, and selflessness. In 1517, More's reputation as an intellectual and public servant reached new heights when he successfully quelled the evil May Day riot in London. This ability to mediate and bring peace to turbulent situations impressed King Henry VIII, who soon sought More's counsel. More's role in the king's court grew, and by 1521 he was knighted. He helped Henry compose Defence of the Seven Sacraments, a response to the growing influence of Protestantism and Martin Luther's challenge to the Catholic Church. More's steadfast defence of Catholic doctrine earned him the king's favour, and he rose through the ranks of court, becoming Speaker of the House of Commons and Treasurer of England's Exchequer. But as More's power grew, so did the tensions between him and the king. In the late 1520s, Henry VIII's desire for a male heir, coupled with his growing infatuation with Anne Boleyn, led him to seek an annulment of his marriage to Catherine of Aragon. This became known as the Great Matter and would be the defining issue of More's life. As Henry moved towards breaking with the Catholic Church and establishing himself as the supreme head of the Church of England, More found himself caught between his loyalty to the king and his devotion to the Pope. At first, More tried to support Henry, but he quickly found it difficult to reconcile his beliefs with the king's actions. When Henry's insistence on marrying Anne Boleyn became more pronounced, More withdrew from court, citing health problems, though it was clear that his objections to the king's religious reforms were the true cause. More's refusal to condone the king's actions escalated when he refused to attend Anne's coronation in 1533, and things came to a head when Henry passed the Act of Succession, which required everyone to swear an oath acknowledging Anne's daughter Elizabeth as the legitimate heir to the throne and recognising Henry as the supreme head of the church. For Thomas More, this was the final blow. He could not in good conscience accept that a monarch could usurp the authority of the Pope, and his refusal to take the oath led to his imprisonment in the Tower of London on April the 17th, 1534. During his time in the Tower, More was offered a royal pardon if he simply accepted the king's supremacy, but More, ever steadfast in his beliefs, refused. In the face of this political and personal turmoil, More wrote letters to his family, including one to his daughter Margaret from his cell, reflecting on his life, his faith, and his commitment to truth. These letters reveal a man who remained resolute in his convictions even in the face of death. On July 6, 1535, Thomas More was executed for treason. As he ascended the scaffold at Tower Hill, he declared himself the king's good servant, but God's first. His final words reflected the humility, integrity, and courage that had defined his life. He was beheaded and his body was buried in an unmarked grave at the Tower of London, just as Anne Boleyn's would be years later. Despite the political upheaval and religious transformation that followed his death, Thomas More's legacy endured. In 1886 he was beatified, and in 1935 he was canonised by Pope Pius XI. His life serves as a powerful reminder of the courage it takes to stand up for one's beliefs, even in the face of overwhelming opposition. Thomas More's writings, life of service and ultimate sacrifice for his faith have left an indelible mark on history. He is remembered not only for his intellectual contributions, but also for his unyielding devotion to truth, justice, and God. Thomas More's story is one of profound moral courage, a life lived with conviction, and a legacy that continues to inspire centuries after his death. Thomas More's legacy endures not just as a scholar or public servant, but as a symbol of unshakable principle in the face of tyranny. His defiance of King Henry VIII cost him everything, his life, family, and position, but cemented him as a martyr for faith and truth. Nearly 500 years later, his courage continues to inspire those who stand for what is right, no matter what the cost. So what would you have done if placed in More's position? Would you have upheld your beliefs or bowed to the pressures of power? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And please hit that like button if you enjoyed this story, and subscribe for more historical tales. If you're enjoying the channel, scan the QR code on screen right now. It takes you to everything: Patreon, social media, and more. Your support helps keep these stories coming, so thanks for watching.